Tragedy off the coast of Sicily. One of the most luxurious superyachts sinking. The incident resulting in the loss of 7 lives. And now a long list of questions remain unanswered. Sky News Digital Originals presents The Bayesian Tragedy. The Bayesian was no ordinary yacht, a symbol of wealth and engineering excellence. But on that fateful day, this floating palace would become the scene of one of the most baffling maritime tragedies in recent history. The luxury superyacht sinking in less than 60 seconds. How could a vessel of this size go down so quickly? And what led to this sudden and devastating disaster?
I think the first thing to learn is that there's no such thing as an unsinkable vessel, in spite of what the manufacturer said. Famous last words are, "This boat can't sink," and we know one good example of that. So no vessel is immune to nature. And I think usually the sort of sinkings you see are a combination of events, some human, some natural events. And we do know that there was an extreme weather event that hit that area very quickly in very short notice with very high winds. Whether that was a water spout, strictly speaking, or whether it was just a very strong downburst, they're very similar things in some ways. You've got a severe thunderstorm which builds up very quickly. Not uncommon in this area, particularly at the moment where the seas are warmer than they should be. It's 3.5 degrees warmer at the moment in that area than the 20-year average. So the conditions are right for that sort of event to occur. Now, no other vessels were hit by this, but the Bayesian's fairly unusual. She is vast and she has an enormous mast. One of the tallest masts in the world. And that mast, I've seen the mast, I've seen it actually being fitted. And it's big to the point you can walk up the mast, up the inside of the mast, it's that big. So a huge surface area there. This boat should be fine under most conditions. It's designed to have big sails on it, and it has a keel which then balances it. It looks like the keel was retracted up, which is not a problem, because if she was motoring rather than sailing, you probably wouldn't worry about the keel too much. So a combination of the keel being up under very strong winds and the fact that she was at anchor, she was sort of being held in position, if you like, meant that the conditions were right for her to tilt. Now, there are all kinds of uncertainties coming through with the investigation. It's thought that one of the sort of main doors to the port side, to the left-hand side, were open, and this is a door that's used to, get things like jet skis in and out. And if there are internal doors open, that shouldn't be a problem. But if there are other internal doors open to the engine room, then the ship could flood if it was put beam on to the sea. We know the waves weren't huge, because if you look at the before and after pictures, you've got this picture of Bayesian in port looking beautifully calm and serene. You then got pictures, tragic pictures of people frantically trying to rescue people on board. And in both cases, the sea is calm. So it's not a large storm that's built up over time coming in from the open ocean. This is a local storm. I also had a look at the weather reports, the weather data, not the reports, but the data from Palermo Airport, a few miles to the west of Porticello. And what's interesting there is you see sort of a fairly gentle breeze coming from the south of about 2 or 3 kilometers an hour. It then shoots up in about 20 minutes to about 40 kilometers an hour and then drops as quickly. And that's indicative of the edge of one of these supercells, these big storm events. And so, there's no doubt about it, what happened very quickly. As the vessel was hit by these strong winds, it would have been pushed onto its side. And if there was water ingress into the vessel, that would make it tip further. Ironically, it was the mast that then sort of kept the vessel afloat for a short while, because its huge size, its buoyancy and so on. The mast helped it float in some ways, and actually it would have stopped it from turning turtle, which could have been an advantage, because it could well have given a bigger air pocket. The vessel then sank very quickly. We're talking here of a few minutes. time for some people to escape, and actually I'm quite impressed at that time of night so many people did manage to escape from the yacht alive. Tragically, as we know, 7 people died. And the yacht sank very rapidly in 50 meters of water, a difficult depth to get to. It's not beyond diving depth, but the amount of time divers can spend down there is about 10 minutes. And we're looking here at a yacht on its side, full of water. It's just gone through a storm of some form, so there's debris all over the place.
Among those who perished are Jonathan Bloomer, the esteemed chairman of Morgan Stanley International. He died alongside his devoted wife, Judy. The yacht's founder, Mike Lynch, also died alongside his beloved daughter, Hannah Lynch. This devastating incident has left a profound impact on their families and the broader community. Initial reports into the tragedy have left many stunned. According to findings, the victims who perished in the sinking died from dry suffocation.
I mean, when we're talking about dry drowning, you're talking about the fact that people suffocated without water in their lungs. It's unusual, and I think, we knew that the speed at which the boat went down, that there would be air pockets. So we knew there was a chance that some people could have been either trapped or at least found those air pockets. And it looks likely that in this case, 4 people did. Now, whether they were pushed there by the force of the water or whether they clambered there through intent, we don't know. They weren't found in their own cabins. They were at their separate cabin. But the problem is, of course, boats are watertight and tend to be airtight as well as a result. And so if you're in an air pocket, the air pocket by definition is trapped, so the air can't escape, which is a good thing. But of course, when you've got 4 people, you have a limited amount of air, and you will use the oxygen up. And it was some time before divers reached those particular points. And you've got to bear in mind the life of the diver. They are working in very harsh conditions in terms of depth. Water's not too cold. We're 50 meters of water in the Mediterranean. We're still looking at relatively warm waters. Still looking at waters that are going to be in the high 20s, 20 degrees Celsius. The tidal conditions there are very weak. They don't have strong tides in that part of Sicily. In fact, most of the Mediterranean has very low tides, and so the tidal conditions are good. But it is this whole thing of trying to get through a vessel which is on its side, lots of unknowns, and you've only got 10-minute sort of windows to do this in. So it did take a while to get to those sort of cabins further inside the vessel. And I think, tragic to say that we don't know whether those people were unconscious and eventually ran out of air, whether they were conscious and trying to stay alive and afloat. We will never know that answer, I don't think. But we do know that they, as you said, dry drowned. They basically suffocated from too much CO2.
To understand why this tragedy is such a mystery, we need to look inside the Bayesian. The yacht was equipped with state-of-the-art safety features, including life vests, lifeboats, and emergency alarms. So why did these fail?
So it was a tragic incident. The Italian authorities have launched an investigation into the accident. They are looking at the potential of a manslaughter charge for the skipper and 2 of the crew. That hasn't been confirmed yet. What they'll tend to do in Italy is they'll announce the intention to look into this with a view to a manslaughter charge. That doesn't mean to say that the blame has been put there yet, and they don't have all the facts and figures. There's been a lot of discussion about, the black box. And I think people assume that ships are like planes. Very few ships have black boxes, and certainly a vessel of this type wouldn't. There's not much point. On an aircraft, the black box sits in the cockpit. It monitors all the various bits of instrumentation, and it also monitors the discussion that the pilots have. There's no point in a black box operating when the yacht is at anchor. There's no one on the bridge. And actually, it's not a requirement for vessels to carry this. They do have what's called an AIS, which gives an indication of location and 1 or 2 other bits and pieces like vessel heading and speed. And that's used mainly so that other ships can see what's coming. They can usually overlay that AIS information on the radar. So maybe they've got a vessel of a certain name heading their direction at a certain speed, and that helps avoid collisions at sea. And the AIS does show that the Bayesian did drag her anchor quite some distance. alongside one of the other ships, which were moored quite close to. So at the end of the day, it looks like the keel was up, and it looks like this was a very unfortunate accident. Only the inquiry will find out whether certain watertight doors were left open when they should have been shut at night.
Eyewitnesses have described the scene as chaotic. Passengers and crew were reportedly scrambling for safety, but the situation was dire. How could a vessel with advanced safety protocols and a well-trained crew succumb so quickly?
The one classic sinking of an unsinkable ship, of course, was Titanic. And that was a terrible tragedy. But actually, the number of new regulations, laws, and changes to safety at sea that came about from the Titanic were phenomenal. Ranging from radio communication protocols, how life rafts and lifeboats are carried on ships, watertight. There's a whole series of safety measures that came out of the disaster that was the Titanic. I think in this case, I suspect we're going to find that this was a series of unfortunate events, and there's nothing particularly that we will learn from this. But until we know exactly what happened, until we know, why did this vessel sink? It shouldn't have done. Other vessels in the area didn't. We won't know for certain what should have been done. I did read various statements that came from the vessel manufacturer saying that, the skipper should have had, given he had a storm warning, he should have had all the crew and the passengers on deck with life jackets, waiting patiently. That's never going to happen. And I think, you've got to bear in mind that the storm warning was not for a water spout or for this downburst. The storm warning was for something like a 6 or 4.6 or 4.7 gale coming in, which is, important. But you probably wouldn't do much different given that you were at anchor, given that you were sails down with that sort of warning coming in. So, I think to say that the crew didn't heed the storm warning and they should have had everyone on deck, if we did that, we would never get any sleep on a ship because we spent our entire time sitting on deck waiting to sink.
Investigators have been working tirelessly to piece together the puzzle. Theories have ranged from mechanical failure to structural damage, but no definitive cause has been identified. The lack of concrete answers only deepens the mystery.
They've got a lot of footage from the autonomous underwater vehicles, and that takes time. These people kept saying, well, why don't we send an AUV inside the vessel to see who is still alive? You can't use AUVs inside vessels. The problem is with AUVs is that, first of all, they have to be tethered to the surface. You can't use sort of remote control radio waves underwater. Seawater absorbs those waves very quickly. So you have to have a tethered vehicle. The other issue, of course, there is that actually controlling a vehicle like that in the ship itself is very difficult. It takes a very skilled pilot to do that. And you can imagine sort of trying to weave a way around a house with a sort of a drone, but the drone's tethered to something. You have a cable connecting it. It becomes very complex. So, but there is a lot of AUV footage, the video footage from the outside, which will tell whether the doors are open. There is discussion about recovering the vessel, partly to find out what happened, but also, it does represent both a pollution risk. This vessel is carrying quite a lot of diesel, fuel oil for its engines and for its generators. But also, of course, it's sitting in an area where you get a lot of ships trying to anchor. So having this on the seabed will cause problems. So it's very likely they will recover the vessel, and that might give us more information. The crew statements, again, will help in terms of what did happen on the night. So the information will come together. The fact that, the majority of people did survive, which is quite miraculous, will help the investigation. When you get a plane crash or something and everyone is killed, trying to get information is difficult. But in this case, the information will come to light. But it will take time. We're looking here at an inquiry that will take months, not weeks or days.
Was it a mechanical failure that triggered the rapid sinking? Did a critical system malfunction, or was there a flaw in the yacht's design? Some even speculate that sabotage could be a factor, but without conclusive evidence, these remain just theories.
If you look at the Titan submarine last year, that was a foolish escapade. Let's not beat around the bush here. And that is something where you are taking a huge risk, particularly with a vessel that wasn't really tested and wasn't really understood. And so that carried, it's a bit like going out to space. That carries a certain level of risk way above what you'd normally expect. On a vessel this size, the Bayesian was a large vessel. She had all the right safety equipment on board. The life rafts deployed and were very efficient. We know that because people survived because of that. So the Bayesian was a safe vessel to all intents and purposes. I don't think people should stop going to sea on safe vessels. I spent my entire life working at sea, and I have great faith in the ships I use. And I've been caught in some horrendous storms in my career. But there's always that feeling that beneath you have a ship that is solid, well built, and will keep you afloat. And, generally speaking, ships are very safe. It's usually a combination of extreme weather events and some failing somewhere, whether it's mechanical or whether it's human, that does lead to these things sinking. So, this is a very rare event. And yes, it did hit the news big time. Whether that was because of the people on board, but you look back to, a few years ago, there was the loss of the Chica Rafiki, the yacht that sort of sailed back from the Caribbean towards the UK and capsized. And the reason for that was the keel fell off. And it comes back to, yachts need solid keels to stay upright. And I think, that wasn't a particularly high profile group of people, but there was still a strong media interest in that and what happened there. So I think, whether it's a coincidence that the people involved in both of these incidents, the Titan and the Bayesian, were very high-end individuals, or whether it was just a tragedy that could have happened to anyone, I don't know.
As the investigation continues, the families of the victims are left with more questions than answers. They seek closure and justice, but the path to understanding the disaster remains elusive. The sinking of the Bayesian has left a deep scar on the maritime community and all those who were touched by this tragedy. The unanswered questions linger like a dark cloud over the investigation. What truly caused this disaster? The quest for truth continues and the hope for closure remains strong.